No matter what is important to you, then network adaptive encoding can be a tool that aids you in getting your application working.
Right, so network adaptive encoding is a feature of the Makito X encoders. It leverages SRT, and like John was saying, it's all about making sure that your stream gets there, that you have something, even if you have unreliable network conditions. And so we've been talking a lot about the internet in general, but that isn't the only circumstance in which people will run into network problems.
Sure.
There are some others.
Mobile applications or LTE networks, the bandwidth will vary depending on where your mobile truck is at any given time, which cell tower it's talking to, and things like that. So in those cases, as well as other cases, there is a possibility that your bandwidth is not always guaranteed. So if you're doing a mobile type application where you're following via helicopter something happening on the ground and you're using an LTE network, then those type of things are perfect for network adaptive encoding. As the bandwidth changes, your video encoder also is adapted to whatever's available to get your content through. Similar for satellite networks. Weather conditions on the ground can impact the amount of bandwidth that's available on any given satellite link, depending on what type of satellite channel you're using. And network adaptive encoding can also be used to adjust and modify the video encoder bitrate to maximize and optimize the amount of data going through under whichever network conditions or weather conditions may exist. And just the regular internet, at any given time, there can be the network can be swamped by people web browsing on a big event, a live event or something like that. Network adaptive encoding can be used to ride through those, and you still get your content through.
So let's talk about it. Let's show it actually. So. Yeah. To set this up, because we're going to show you a video that illustrates network adaptive encoding, what you're going to see is you're going to see the decoded output of a decoder, and the stream that it's being fed is going through a Makito X encoder that's set at about 10 megabits. Right, 10 megabits was the bit rate that we established the encoder at with network adaptive encoding turned on. That's being sent to the decoder across the network. Now, what we're doing in order to simulate fluctuating network conditions is that we're running through a laptop that has some software that allows us to throttle the bandwidth. And so we've throttled the bandwidth at a rate of somewhere between 15 megabits down to under 5. And it happens. Well, you'll see there's some performance curves that will allow you to understand what's going on. But the idea here is the Makito X is sending us an encoded stream that's intended to be at 10, but it's why don't we go ahead?
The network is being modified or congested, and
so what you can see here actually, so the background is the decoded video stream, and more than anything, what we want you to really notice with the background video is that it's playing. Because what you can see in the graphs, the 3 different graphs here, are various performances that are happening on the left in terms of what the encoder is sending. So the encoder, the blue line represents the bit rate, and you can see this has been running, our test has been running over time, so we've been recording this for a while, and you can see that there's already been some fluctuations, not only in terms of the bit rate, but also in terms of the packet retransmission. So when the network really gets and you can also see in the orange line in the decoder side what packets have been lost. So a minimal number, even though the performance is fluctuating pretty wildly. And that middle graph shows you what's going on
with the network.
With the network. And so actually, we're just kind of going through a pretty big spike. And the key thing to understand is if we didn't have this,
no video would be going through.
This is the point, right? I mean, if network adaptive encoding were not enabled in a situation where your network is really fluctuating like this, you would just be getting a black
screen
signal. You would have no video. And if you've actually been watching the video quality, even though we've been fluctuating from 10 to below 5, the quality remains quite high in terms of the application. Now, maybe people need higher higher quality bit rates than that, but they have to do it obviously based on the network performance. And if the network is going to be capping at 15 megabits, there's no point trying to send 115 megabyte stream.
Sure.
So that's, in a nutshell, that's what's going on with network adaptive encoding. As I mentioned, it is a new feature for the Makito X encoders. If you're interested in knowing more about that, certainly we can talk about it in terms of your questions today. You also have the option to request a demo. There is a form on the side of the player, I believe. If you want to get a demo, please send us your information. There are some other technologies that people should think about, especially when dealing with different types of bit rates. And one that we wanted to talk about, another one we wanted to talk about is multi-bit rate streaming. And this is a different situation, but this is really where you have an encoder and you want to be able to set it up to provide different quality streams to different audiences. So
sure.
When is that useful?
Well, depending on exactly what you want to do with the video. If you want to record it, then you're interested in getting the highest quality that you can out of the encoder for your recording for later use. If it's an archive or you want to use it for promotional material or something of that sort, you want the highest quality you can. And on the opposite side of the spectrum is the mobile users, where the bandwidth is probably coming over Wi-Fi or a cell tower or a cell data plan or something like that, and bandwidth can be very limited. The encoders can be set up with multiple video profiles to meet each one of the different applications needed for the video.
So this is a case where you might need different qualities because you might be sending some on an internal network and others that are going across a
public internet or a LTE network.
You have the different characteristics of the device that you're using. Whether if you're using your mobile phone, you might not need as high quality. Or if you've got a whole bunch of people that are watching something on a set-top box, they might have a different quality need than, say, the video recorder. So
sure, and if you're recording, you don't really care about latency. You can set up the encoding profile to be very long latency, but high quality.
So the key here is that your encoder needs to be able to take that stream and do different things with it.
Right.
So like in the case of a Makito X, it has multiple encoding cores that can be used to produce the different bit rates and to encapsulate them in different outputs.
Yeah.
Okay. Another thing to consider. Well, actually, there are a number of other things that you can consider, but I think metadata is the first one that we want to jump in and talk about because although when we think about video streaming, we generally don't think that metadata could be a very large component of the bandwidth overhead. It
depends on your application again.
Exactly.
So in lots of surveillance and ISR applications, usually there's a very small video data pipe between the encoder and whatever is being used to analyze it. So that typically we want to send video, but at the same time we also want to send metadata. Metadata is information about the video. Where is it being shot? What time of day is it being shot? Other information such as that. But if your transport pipe, sometimes over satellite, is very limited, you need to be able to trade off. Okay, what's really important to you? Is video quality important to you, or metadata is it important to you? And what this new feature in the Makito X encoder allows you to do is filter out specific metadata objects so that only what you absolutely need is transported. And by doing that, you save bandwidth. You can also change the frame rate or the rate at which the metadata is sent. Both these features were added to the latest release of the Makito X encoder. So what that really allows you to do is balance between your video and your metadata, and allows you to tune exactly what's coming to you to best serve the needs of your application.
In this situation, in a defense use case, the networks can be very constrained, where they're dealing with bandwidth of maybe they're only sending a couple of megabits
or less,
and metadata itself can take up a sizable chunk of that bandwidth. So if you know you want to prioritize the video quality, you're going to want to reduce that with metadata filtering. Okay, I think this is an interesting point now. So we've been talking about low latency streaming. We've talked about making sure your stream is low latency. We've talked about encoders and the different types of technologies that you need to think about in terms of making sure that you've got sort of the optimal video quality that you can given the network conditions you're dealing with. But what happens if your network goes down? And this is, I think, this is a whole other area of problems. If you lose your network, you're not going to get any video, right?
Yeah.
So there are things that people do in terms of dealing with that situation. Could you tell us about how people overcome the problem of having a risk in one single point of failure?
Sure. Well, SRT, let's just a quick word about that, was designed to deal with the network conditions that occur. So if there's congestion, it's designed to deal with it. What happens if the entire network goes? There's a fiber cut, a backhoe digs up a fiber optic cable and cuts it. So you lose your link. So what you can do in that, many people do, is they have redundant paths for the exact same video data. It's sent over 2 different ISPs, 2 different networks, from a source to the destination. And what happens at the destination is it monitors both of those sources coming in. If it loses its primary, it then switches over to use the secondary stream as its backup. And that way, you guarantee the delivery of your video. And again, it's all about making sure that your data gets through when you need it.
So in this case, we're talking about those end-to-end workflows. And in this example here, where you can see we've got a Makito X that's sending the same stream over 2 different networks, the decoder is actually doing the failover. So the decoder has recognized that the stream is gone, but it's been configured to be looking for a second one. And when it sees that problem, then it switches to the other stream. So that way, if you really need to make sure that your signal is arriving, things like this are important to consider in terms of making sure that, in all circumstances, the video is arriving. Okay, there are this is maybe a little esoteric, but certainly in terms of low latency workflows, one thing to keep in mind is that one of the reasons for low latency workflows is for interactivity, and maybe even being able to communicate back and forth during those low latency streaming sessions. And audio talkback is a cool feature that's part of our portfolio that people can use that allow them to do something pretty useful, which is communicate with each other.
Sure. So it goes back to that use case we talked about. You have talent in the field talking to a director or talking to a central production facility. So the talent is speaking and talking, but the director may want to give direction either to the cameraman or the talent themselves. And to do that, we provide this facility, this talkback facility, where an audio track can be sent back from the decoder to the encoder and presented to either the cameraman or the talent in the field, so that they can take direction from the director and do what the director wants them to do, whether it's change the view to look at a site of a news event, or start the interview with another person, or whatever may be required. And that audio talkback facility allows that two-way interactive application to be executed in an easier fashion with less equipment.
And given that we're talking about low latency workflows here, of course, if this was not a low latency situation, having a talkback function would be sort of kind of a pointless endeavor anyway, because you could tell somebody to do something, but if nobody's going to see it for
20 seconds,
it starts to get very complicated to coordinate that kind of thing. So audio talkback can be a useful feature. Okay, so last but not least, because I think this is the last thing that we're talking about right now. Security, I think we can never overstate. This is not particularly related to low latency, but when we're talking about unreliable networks and we're talking about public internet, we're talking about putting your stream out across the network, connecting to the internet and making that information available outside of a firewall, for instance.
Exactly.
Security becomes a major concern.
Becomes absolutely a critical component. Your systems are now visible from anywhere on the planet. So you have to be sure that they are secure. There's 2 aspects here that are very important. One is securing the device. In other words, making sure that only you are accessing the device. The other aspect is making sure your content is secure. This is where the S in SRT comes in, secure. The content is encrypted before transmission, so only you are able to view it at the destination. And the device security is handled by all the features that were added to provide common criteria, resiliency to the Makito X encoder. And all those two aspects together make for a very secure system.
So we have our history, our legacy in dealing with broadcast workflows and defense workflows has given us a lot of expertise in the area of security.
Which is coming in very useful. Yes,
yeah.
We publish guidelines on how to configure the encoder to maximize the security, to make sure that only you are accessing that device and only you can see the content.
So, so that's been an overview of some of the important technologies and considerations that you should be looking at when you're thinking about implementing low latency streaming workflows over unreliable networks like the public internet. So just in case you're looking for solutions, we, of course, from Haivision, we provide the Makito X family of encoders, and there are a pretty broad range of different options that are available depending on what your specific needs are. I just want to walk you through some of them at a high level. We have encoders for H.264, we have encoders for HEVC. We have a number of different configurations from single channel SDI to DVI, depending on what people might need there. We talked about being able to record on board. We have the Makito X with storage, which gives you either removable or fixed storage options so that you can actually be recording those files as you're streaming them simultaneously. There are different decoders. There's an H.264 decoder, an HEVC decoder. And sometimes people want to implement their encoders in high-density deployments inside of data centers, for instance, in areas where space is at a premium, and there are different options in terms of being able to rack mount 6 or up to 21, well, actually even 1 if you want to rack mount it, but up to 21 encoders in a single high-density deployment. So those are sort of the more general purpose encoders. We also have some more specialized encoders that are available for ISR workflows, from the Makito Air to the Makito X Harsh to the Makito XCR. So there are a number of different options there that are meant for high temperature environments, for environments where ruggedized enclosures and form factor is very important. So there are options across the board there. Taking a step back at Haivision in general, we do have a number of other solutions. So we've been talking a lot about encoding today. We have other technologies for internet streaming, including our KB series of encoders and transcoders. We have options for stream replication and flipping across networks, Haivision Media Gateway. We have a number of different players and decoder options that are available. We talked about some of the decoders already. We have set-top boxes, and then we have the media management platforms like the Haivision Media Platform in case you need an enterprise video platform, IPTV solutions, digital signage solutions, and solutions as well for streaming broadly to the internet audiences, which is actually what we're using today. And so that's just a quick overview of the products from the Haivision family. I think just as a summary now, in terms of the things that we've been talking about, the key things to take away from this are, if you want to do low latency streaming over the unreliable networks, low latency streaming over unreliable networks, you need to consider the network. There are different options, from satellite to MPLS to public internet. And as we were saying at the beginning, public internet is great because it's flexible and it's very cost effective, but it does have reliability issues that you have to consider in terms of taking advantage of it. Protocol can be a very important decision that you make. So SRT, as we were talking about, can be a great choice in terms of making sure that you have the reliability you need when using the internet. Codecs can matter in terms of bit rate, in terms of quality, and of course the end-to-end solution in terms of the latency on the encoding side all the way through to the decoding side. So these are some of the key considerations that you need to be thinking about when looking at these workflows. And last but not least, if you are looking for more information about Makito X, we have a lot of information online, so please go ahead and check it out. There are videos on the Makito X product pages that go through a number of different features. We have a data sheet, a comprehensive data sheet that talks about all of the different flavors, the capabilities, the features, down to the granular detail about the technical specifications of each. And of course, last but not least, if you want to get more information, you can always reach out to us and request a demo. And hopefully you have seen some things today that make you want to do that. So please, by all means, go ahead and do that. So with that, I think we're ready to jump over and see what we've got in terms of questions. So I'm just going to pull up my laptop here and see what we've got coming in here.
We've got.
All right, so give me a second here. So yeah, okay. We've got a bunch of different questions. The first question here is specific to the question of, so this is about network adaptive encoding. And the question is, what kind of, so right, we were talking about the Makito X as the encoder that's being used. What kind of decoder do I need to use for network adaptive encoding?
Well, network adaptive encoding relies on SRT. So your any decoder that supports SRT should be able to work with network adaptive encoding. That being said, the decoder has to be able to deal with the varying bit rate. Not all decoders can. So special design decoder, and of course our Makito X decoder is designed to deal with that.
Does network adaptive encoding work with HEVC?
That's a simple one.
Yes. That is but an important question, and certainly a question that more and more people are looking at HEVC as a solution for their workflows, especially as they look at using more bandwidth-constrained networks, since they can get higher quality in either the same or potentially even a smaller bit rate.
Sure.
And that's one of the major advantages. The disadvantage of HEVC is that it requires a bit more processing power, but with the Makito X HEVC encoder, that takes care of that for you. Okay, so what happens to video in the event of a complete network failure? I think we sort of touched on that question, which was what happens if your network goes down? If your network goes down, well, you're going to lose your video. And that's where it comes to having the redundant path capability. So if you have to deal with all eventualities at all costs, then the best way to do is to have redundant paths and send your video and over the two different paths and have the failover capability of the decoder take care of it. Okay. Could we use SRT over LTE Wi-Fi networks for real-time conversational video? Yes. As I mentioned earlier at the very beginning, that 200 millisecond limit is what basically psychologists have determined is necessary so that you don't wind up with an unnatural flow in a conversation. So yes, you can do it. It may be, depending on how far you're going, it might not work from one end of the planet to the other, but within the metropolitan area, there's no reason why it couldn't work. This is a question about software encoding solutions. Are there any software-based encoding solutions that utilize the SRT protocol? Yes. Our KB encoder also supports SRT, and many other members of the SRT Alliance have software-based encoders that have integrated SRT, so all of them support the SRT protocol, and they can be used. Okay, so last but not least, this is the last question. Maybe this question came before we talked about the use cases for network adaptive encoding, but when would I use network adaptive encoding? So we did talk about a number of different scenarios, but maybe you could just recap them for the benefit of the audience. Sure. Well, the best place to use network adaptive encoding is when you are, we talked about the three applications, the mobile, the satellite, and the internet streaming. In the cases where you expect to experience some sort of network congestion, either because you're going from cell tower to cell tower, or because of weather conditions, or because of just the potential for packet loss that may occur on the general internet. Those are the cases you want. Places where you don't really want to use network adaptive encoding is if you've got a lockdown MPLS network. You're guaranteed with a guaranteed SLA. You don't need it there. Your bandwidth is guaranteed by the provider. So there's no point in adding network adaptive encoding in that type of infrastructure. Okay, I think that is. Okay, wait a second. We have. Okay, so we do have a couple other questions. I think that that for the sake of time right now, we're going to We're going to stop the webinar. We're going to ask people that if they had a specific question that we didn't address, to please follow up with us. We'd be happy to talk about them in more detail. Thank everybody for joining. As I mentioned before, this is obviously been all about low latency streaming, and if you are looking for encoding solutions to enable those workloads, the Makito X family is the way to go. Please reach out to us for a demo if you're interested. I'd like to thank John for being here on the webinar with me today. I'd like to thank the team for helping put this together, and for everybody who's attended, thank you very much for being here. We'd like to wish you a happy holiday, and we look forward to hopefully talking to you in much more detail about these solutions. So thank you, everybody, very much.
Happy holidays, everyone.